All right, so thank you all for joining us at this workshop where we're going to talk about introducing and contextualizing your sources in your writing. So it's going to be myself, Melissa Mach from the Writing Center, and then we're going to hear from Melody Steiner from the Bass Library about some ways to, some additional ways to contextualize your sources and to really look into where they are coming from and address some potential biases. So I will just get started. If there was a top 5 list of things that you should really know in order to excel at using sources in your academic writing, the thing that I'm going to address here is definitely in contention for number 1. Introducing material or stuff that you've gathered from sources like summaries, paraphrases, quotations. It can be tricky because it involves a lot of prep work that you have to do ahead of time before you actually put that stuff in your essay. So no matter what it is, no matter what this thing is that you're using in your writing, the very first thing that you should do before you read it is to find out all about it. So you want to know things about the thing that you're writing about before you even start looking at it. And so the prep work, the background work that you're doing is crucial. When you do this background work, when you find out about your source, you are equipping yourself with some of the information that you need before you just start throwing that information in your paper. When you drop information from a source that you found into your essay without mentioning something about what it is, and so that's going to be who wrote it, what you think the goal of their piece was, when it was published or written, where it originally showed up, and maybe where it showed up again, how come or why the writer took the approach that they decided to take, or how they made the point that they're making. All of that stuff, putting information in your paper without mentioning these items, or at least a couple of them, that's basically like mentioning someone in a conversation with no background information. And so you might have been on the receiving end of a conversation like this in the past, where someone is, you're out to lunch with somebody, you're out to lunch with your good friend Marguerite, and you and Marguerite are just talking about the weekend, and she says, so I was running errands on Saturday and I bumped into Alexis and she told me they're going to start building a new roller coaster at Cedar Point. Well, you've never met or even heard of Alexis before. She's never mentioned, Marguerite has never brought up Alexis. And you're like, wait, hold on a second. I'm sorry, who is Alexis? Oh yeah, your friend says, I went to high school with Alexis. Her dad's the head engineer at Cedar Point. She knows about all the big projects before they go public. So now you know some stuff about Alexis that helps to put this into context, this information that Marguerite is giving to you. You know who Alexis is, how Marguerite knows Alexis, why Alexis might know this information about the roller coaster before anyone else does or before it hit the news. It makes her a little bit more credible. It goes a long way to putting the source into context. Now you know. Now you can understand a little bit better how this person fits into your friend's life and allows you to decide for yourself about whether the information that you're hearing is credible. Acronyms are something that we use because they help us to remember stuff. And so an acronym that can help you remember what to do when it comes to including information from source material is ICE. Pretty much every time you include information from sources in every essay that you will ever write until the end of time is introducing, citing, and explaining that source. And that basically boils down to ICE. that's why we use this acronym. Introducing, citation, and explanation helps you to remember what you need when it comes to putting information from a source into your essay. So before you include anything from a source, whether that be a little summary of it, a quote that you think is interesting and supports your point, or a paraphrase, you should make sure that you at least include 2 to 3 of the following. The first thing that you need is the name of the writer. So before you just start putting, what this piece was about, you have to introduce your person, the name of the writer. So in MLA, typically we introduce the writer the first time with their full name. After that, it's customary to just use the last name only. Okay, now we know who they are, but now we need to know a little bit more about them. You need to know something about them that establishes why they're relevant. Now, the best way to do this, just Google them. Throw their name up in that search bar and find out, to do a 5-minute search, see what else they've written, where they went to school, where do they work now, what kind of stuff are they interested in, are they on Twitter, do they have a Wikipedia page? Like, all of this stuff just helps kind of give you kind of like a broad overview of who your writer is and like what they're about, what other stuff they've worked on. That's going to give you a lot more clues into who this person is. A lot of the times, if you're reading in an anthology or a textbook, even in some journals, they'll even include a little bio of the person, and that's great. Still Google them anyway, because that bio might be out of date. They might have done more things. Pop open that browser window and stick that name in there and get yourself some more background information. And then put that in your introduction of your source. At least something. Then you want to say the name of the selection and what it is. And this is very important too. You have to know what the thing is before you can talk about it. Is this a book, a whole book? Is it a chapter from a book? Is it an article on a newspaper website? Is it an article in a journal? Is it something else? The type of work that you're using is going to determine how it appears in print and how it's going to look on your works cited page. So you know that when you are using something that is inside of something else, what's it usually get? Do you remember? That's right. And if you're using a thing that stands all by itself, what's that usually get? Exactly. So when you have a thing that stands alone, like a book, a television series, an album, it's going to look different than a song in that album, an article in that textbook, a chapter in a book. Those are going to get quotation marks. So you have to know what the thing is so that you can make sure that it appears correctly in your essay and also on your works cited. Where and when was it published? So this makes a difference too, right? If you're writing about something that's a current topic and you find a source and you look and see when it was published, and it was published in 1998, then you're going to treat it a little bit differently than if you are writing about something, you find a source and it was published in 2021. Much different context, different times. And then, so where was it originally published, and then where does it show up now? Was it originally on a website and now it's an anthology? Was it originally in a book and now it's a chapter that you just found on the internet somewhere? You kind of just want to know, where did this thing originally show up and where am I finding it today? If in fact you are finding it in a different place. So the information that you've chosen to include from your source to support the point you are making, all that comes way after all that introducing you just did. So this is where you actually put the stuff that you thought was good from the source, whether that be a summary of their argument, a paraphrase of something that they said, or a quote that you've decided to pull out and put quotation marks around and use. So all of that prep work happens before you just drop anything in there about the source. Then you need correct parenthetical citation. And that is what shows up in your little parentheses after you include the information. How do you know if what you're doing is right? How do you know if your parenthetical citation is correct? Usually, what we suggest is to go to the OWL at Purdue, to the MLA in-text citations area, and just kind of check it out. Most commonly, you're going to use like last name and page number, but if you're working with an internet source, you might not have a page number. And so it gives you all of those guidelines of, what you need. And so the only way that you know what you need is to look it up. And so I would have this site bookmarked if I'm writing essays on the regular. So you've got your introduction, you've got your citation, and now it's time to explain why did I decide to use this information to support the point that I'm making. And that is your ICE. And you should do that for every source that you use. Never put information from a source into your paper without introducing who they are. Always make sure that you're citing where that information came from, and then explain, why do I think that this information from this particular source supports what I'm trying to say in my essay? So again, note the number of stuff that you have to put in there way before you get to the actual source information that you want to include. Not only are you going to provide a more robust picture of like the source that you're using, that you're discussing and talking about, you're also going to, I know that, my students constantly say like, oh, I don't know how I'm ever going to get this many words. Like this paper has to be 1,750 words. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get to that. This is the way that you do that. Like, this is how you help to like put bulk into your paper, because when you do this right, it's a lot of words. It gives a lot of context, and so it not only improves your paper, but it also helps you get where you need to go. So I like to think about this acronym also as a sandwich, and it helps that it's lunch, right? Because everybody loves a sandwich or pizza at lunch. And so basically, you wouldn't just, if someone came into a deli and said, hey, I would like a turkey, you wouldn't just roll up a deli meat of turkey and hand it to them. They would look at you like, what is this? What is this? Unless they asked for like, an unwich, right? In which case, I guess that's acceptable. But most people, when they're thinking about a turkey sandwich, they're thinking about all of the stuff. And so your introduction, the name of the writer, what other things that they've done in the past, where the work was published, like that's all the toppings that you're layering on before you get to the meat of the thing that you're presenting. And so that is the paraphrase, the summary, the quote. And then you're finishing that up with that last slice of bread, which is the explanation of why you decided to use this thing in the first place. And so that whole sandwich is like what you want to present each time you introduce a source and the quote, the source material that you're going to be using. So this is sort of like the text format of the sandwich, right? Here's your bread, your lettuce, your onions, your mayo. Here's your turkey. Here's your bread, the rest. So you can think about that sandwich when you introduce your source material and make sure that, you're giving somebody something that has some substance and not just, the deli meat. So doing this, it takes time and practice, like training yourself to, when you get a piece of information to read, training yourself to like go Google this person before you even start reading it, that's a skill that like you have to work on, because your first impulse is, okay, I got to get this read. Let me just start reading it and highlighting it, right? It takes practice to say like, okay, I have an article. First, I need to find out about the person and know about the context of this piece before I even start reading it. But it's worth it. Because, You're dedicating yourself to the pursuit of scholarship. You're dedicating yourself to like thinking critically about the source that you are about to engage with. It takes dedication and attention in order to get this information. And when you do it, it inevitably just makes you better. It makes you a better thinker. It makes you a better writer. It makes your essays better. And so it's totally worth it to get into this habit. There's some more ice gifts. Yeah, I just found out that this semester that only old people use GIFs. I think I mentioned that in class. So sadly, this presentation is an old person presentation, I guess. And so later, we're going to take the work that you brought to work on in this workshop, and we're going to do a little exercise. But before we do that, we're going to talk more about actually contextualizing your source and finding out more about it. So I'm going to turn it over to Melody, and we're going to find out more about that.
All right, so my name is Melody Steiner, as Melissa mentioned, and I'm going to be covering the portion today about evaluating resources using various reading frameworks, and we'll talk specifically about one framework that I happen to like the best at this time. And then I will direct you to some library resources, guides that have additional information on contextualizing your sources and some information on citation as well. So as Melissa mentioned before with the ICE, how you introduce and explain plays a significant role in the way you present information. And in order to introduce and explain your information, you need to have some context as to what type of source this is, how it's relevant, what its truthfulness is. And there isn't really a shortcut to this. It's something that you just have to learn how to do and practice consistently in order to move forward with it. My question is, there's this term, lateral reading, and it's a fairly new term. Does anybody know what it is? Any ideas? Okay, well, I don't want to put anyone on the spot here. So a generation ago, writing a research paper, a couple generations ago, you'd go to the library, you'd get a book or a journal from the physical stacks, and you'd find something that seemed like it was relevant to your paper, and then maybe you'd take it home and you'd read through it, and then how did you fact check back in the day? Melissa? Yeah, you could do that. You could take a look at the citations in the back. You could go make a trip back to the library. You could ask a librarian if they happen to know the subject really well, if they could refer additional resources to you. You could, if you were deeply entrenched in scholarship, you could maybe send some letters to a faculty member at a university or make some phone calls to fact check. But it was a lengthy process, right? So now that we have the internet, we do a much faster process, and it's called lateral reading. And basically what it is opening up a bajillion tabs in your browser. Because what you're doing, as Melissa mentioned, is checking out the source while you are reading it. So you're searching for information about the source while you're reading it. The concept was coined by Stanford History Education Group. It's not super old, but I've seen it referenced in other places since then, so it seems to be really, picking up speed. It describes a process in which, as you read, you also research the authority of the source that you're looking at, and also the perspective of the source that you're looking at as well. I don't have time to share it with you today, but there's a wonderful crash course video that talks about lateral reading. I think it's funded by Stanford. It's very funny. The guy who does it is hilarious, and he gives good context as to why it's an essential skill set to learn. And so all of what I'm talking about today sort of falls under the umbrella of different ways to conduct lateral reading. So we can apply lateral reading strategies to more rigorous standards using reading frameworks such as the one that Melissa was mentioning, the 5 Ws. the who, what, when, where, why. And actually, the 5 W's are the oldest that I am aware of the reading frameworks. It was referenced in Aristotle's works, Hermogoras of Temnus, whoever that is, and St. Thomas Aquinas. And the Old Latin, I'm going to try to say it, but I am not a Latin expert. It's qui, quid, quando, ubi, cur, quem, ad modum, cubis, adminiclus. So it is complicated. But those words mean, in Latin, who, what, where, when, why, in what way, and by what means. And the 5 W's were originally applied to uses in the discipline of philosophy and also in Bible study as well. And then by the 19th century, journalism began to pick it up as, maybe we should utilize this strategy when we are, collecting sources for our articles that we are writing so that we can be, hold ourselves to a more rigorous standard. In The Elephant's Child in 1902, Kipling references it as well in a poem. And the poem is, it's very tiny font on this, I keep 6 honest serving men, they taught me all they knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. So you can see there's quite a tradition of using the 5 W's. And Melissa mentioned how, which I think wasn't originally in the formula, but then has people, it's one of those pieces to it that really, does need to be explored as well. So that was kind of the foundational, and librarians were using that as their evaluation, the primary evaluation method when they were talking to students about how to look at resources. But then the internet happened. And so in 2004, the evaluation CRAP was developed by Sarah Blakesley at California State University. And my question to you is, so this was developed in 2004. Does anybody know when Google came out, when the search engine Google came out? Yes? Oh, actually a little bit earlier, but I would say that probably a lot of people were not using it until around then. So it came out in 1998. And what happened was it was sort of a dumping ground, and people were just throwing everything into Google. And so instructors at the time were saying, don't use internet, use journals and use books and use the physical because we don't know what's going on over there. But the students were still going to the internet. So Sarah Blakesley decided that she would develop some kind of system that connects with the 5 W's to help students remember to evaluate the sources that they were pulling from the internet. And so what she says in her article that she wrote in the LOEX Quarterly in 2004 is sometimes a person needs an acronym that sticks. And she also said, that's why it's called CRAP. And she also says there is grand consensus among all walks of academia that with the infinite variety and levels of scholarship on the internet, the evaluation of information is one of the most important skills that we as librarians and instructors can teach our students. And then for every source of information, we now have a handy frame of reference to inquire, is this CRAP? So that's kind of the origin of CRAP there, and I'll go ahead and give you the acronym because, as Melissa mentioned, we like acronyms. It helps us to remember things. And you'll see how it ties in with those 5 W's that she was talking about. So CRAP stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. Currency, the timeliness of information, that would be the when. Relevance, the importance of the information for your needs, that could be the what or the how. Authority, the source of information, would sort of fit into the who. Accuracy, the reliability, truthfulness, and correctness of the content. I'm not sure the 5 W's fully accounts for that, but CRAP does. And then purpose, the why, the reason the information exists. So that was created in 2004. And then, maybe 8 years after, in 2012, the RADAR framework showed up. And RADAR was developed by Jane Mandelios from the American College of Greece. And you'll see kind of a difference in the feel of this framework. I think what's happened here is you had students who were defaulting to use the internet, and then you have faculty who are recommending that they use physical sources, and then by 2012, things have started to switch. And so you have faculty members who are saying, no, we actually want you to use the internet, and students who are saying, oh my goodness, I'm super overwhelmed. So Jane says, the internet is now fused with all aspects of life, personal, social, professional, and academic. At all levels of education, students are now being required or assumed to use the internet. And at the same time, more emphasis is being placed on self-directed learning, which is often erroneously seen as synonymous with internet-based learning. We are surrounded by so much information in so many forms that it often seems that we are drowning. So there's a shift there. Crap, it's like, oh, we don't really want you using this, it's all crap out there. And radar is like, oh, you have to use it, you have to learn how to swim. So that's kind of where this developed. And I will give you I know you guys have to leave, so no worries, you don't have to worry about that. The acronym is R for relevance, how is the information relevant, A, authority, who is the author, D, date, when was the information published, A, appearance, and that is kind of a new one for radar. You're looking, and Melissa talked a bit about it during her presentation as well. You're trying to analyze, is this a book? Is this an article? Is this a website? Is this a blog post or social media post? Now you have to pay attention to the appearance of the item. And then reason, why did the author publish this? So it does fit again in with those, who, when, what. It doesn't really, I noticed it doesn't quite talk about truthiness like CRAP does, but I think the assumption is that if we look at these other frameworks, that eventually we'll come to the truthfulness of the item itself. So that is radar. And then we shift again to SIFT. We shift to SIFT, which was developed a few years after in 2017. And it was created by Mike Caulfield. And he wrote an ebook about, the ebook is titled Web Literacy for Student Fact Checkers. And basically he's changed the dynamic. So instead of students are drowning, this is fun. This is a game. Evaluating is going to be like playing chess. So you can kind of feel it in the way he designs the framework. He has 4 moves. And the moves are check for previous work, which is search for author or idea to find more information, do that Google search that Melissa was saying, and then go upstream from the source, find an original source to understand the truth or the trustworthiness of the information, then read laterally. So he's using that term that's kind of fairly new that Stanford created. Read what other people are saying about the source, and then circle back. If you get lost and you hit dead ends, and you find yourself going down an increasingly confusing rabbit hole, back up and start over again, and you'll know a little bit better next time. So those are his 4 moves, but the way he has them worded in the acronym are quite funny. It's like DARE almost. It's stop, investigate, find, and trace. So slow down, stop is slow down before you share information on the internet, or share or use the information. Investigate is use a search engine or Wikipedia to find out more about the information. And it's interesting because Stanford also recommends Wikipedia as an initial starting point. And particularly to scroll down and look at the reference section of Wikipedia. Fascinating, because it's like librarians used to say, no. But now Stanford's saying, yes, actually. So, and then find, ignore the source and look for other information sources on the same topic. Do they say the same things or similar things to the source? And then trace, if the source references another source, statistics, quotes, summaries of laws, etc., find the original source and utilize that instead. So covering all of those kind of as background, and then the year after that, ACT UP was developed by Don Stahura. And ACT UP is, it's a method that sort of evolved from big social movements like Me Too and the Black Lives Matters. And it's essentially, it's a call. So instead of, evaluating is a game, or evaluating is to get rid of all that bad stuff, it becomes a call to consider evaluating your source material in a social context. And the term itself, ACT UP, is actually an 80s movement to bring attention to the AIDS epidemic. So Dawn's reasoning for using this term is she says the social movements evolve over time. What if I could create a method that not only effectively evaluated information, but also brought to the forefront a social movement from the past, reinforcing that change takes time. And then to ACT UP is to actively engage, you know what, I think I might, yeah, there we go. To actively engage in dismantling oppression of people of color and acting upwards to create a more socially just system. And then beyond this, Dawn says, we have to talk about privilege in publishing and the implications it has on what articles we find in library resources. So I kind of resonate with this as a librarian because I do see routinely that source material is sort of tilted towards one particular demographic and that people that are not necessarily seeing other types of sources out there. But for ACT UP, the acronym you'll see actually relies quite heavily on some of those previous iterations. Author, just like just go all the way back to the WHO. Currency, which was in the CRAP model. When was this resource written and published? Truth, how accurate is this information and can you verify with other credible sources? And then the two kind of newer ones is evaluating bias. So is the information presented in a way to sway the audience to a particular point of view? And then are the authors the only ones writing or publishing on the topic? And who is missing from the conversation? And what might be the inherent biases of the author? So you'll see some echoes of some of those previous evaluation methods in this, but I think it also encompasses and adds to the conversation some newer ones that may create some changes in scholarship, which is exciting. So essentially, each of these methods address a need for more critical evaluation of sources. And with the rise of diversity of information because of the internet, we have more need than ever to adopt systematic methods to our approaches to seeking information. And then students should be actively aware of multiple ways to read laterally, as this will make them more critical participants in their own learning and then better thinkers overall. And evaluating sources, it's not going to be as simple as checking a box that says peer-reviewed, even though we would like it to be. We would like for things to be easy and just click a thing and then everything is fact-checked and perfect, but that's not the world that we live in. It's very complicated. So learning how to dig deeper than that, I think, is a real important skill set. So kind of moving on and transitioning just a little bit, evaluation frameworks, knowing more about where the source comes from, its purpose and its relevance to your writing will help you to better be able to introduce, cite, and explain. And then whatever framework you use, the context of that will be key. And because of that, the reason why that is because we are all informed by our experiences and our culture and identity. And so I've constructed a library guide on culture and identity. It's still in draft format, but I think it might help to add to the conversation and sort of build more options for students looking for writing resources and looking for resources just on various cultures and identities, and using the guide to dig deeper into culture and identity constructs. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this link just to kind of show you. I tried to sort of make it in alignment with the mission of the college's Equity by Design team, and to align with the college's mission to provide opportunities for communities to thrive through cultural experiences. But it's meant to establish some resources related to exploring different identities and different cultural perspectives. And it's from it's for writers. It's meant to be for writers of academia and for writers of creative fiction. So It's something definitely worth exploring. If you would like a link, I would be more than happy to send it to you. I think it's currently private on the library's page, but at some point I would like to publicize it once I feel confident about it. But it's talking essentially about different ways to write about these cultures and these identities, and ways that we can uplift those cultures and identities, and things to think about as you're looking for resources. And then the final piece, citation. So we all know that there are these auto citation generators and cite features in the databases when you do a search. And I think the most important thing is students are going to try to use them because students like easy things. But we want them to know that they are usually wrong. So if they choose to use an auto citation generator, fine, it is a skeleton. It's going to just grab a bunch of things from the record and lump it all together in kind of a wrong format. And then they need to go and check it and make sure that it is accurate. And it probably contains errors in capitalization and spacing and spelling, and sometimes the author names are just completely missing, and sometimes the book is italicized, and sometimes it's all wrong. So if they choose to utilize a citation auto generator, to seek out help from the Writing Center and the library, because we have some expertise in that, and we can direct them to resources and help them to kind of find where their citations are not working right. And then the library has a guide as well for citations, and it has it's sort of like, it's a very teeny tiny sliver of Owl Purdue, or Purdue Owl. It's got some examples in there. Bethany is very much, hello, are you awake? It's deciding not to click, but maybe what did I do? I shut it down. I turned it off. Okay, it's fine, we're good. Anyway, there is a guide on the library's page that has examples of in-text citation, examples of how you would cite for a work cited for both MLA and APA. It has formatting of papers, so very, very useful in that context. And I think that the handout has a link to a QR code to that guide. And then if you're watching the presentation later, if you just go to the library's page and hit the Ask the Library button, you can type in citations and it'll bring it up for you. And that is pretty much all I have at this point.